Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jared. And in this episode, this will be a quick one. It's going to be about switching out the spark plugs in a 2016 Ford Transit Connect that is using the Ford Duratech 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so what we see in front of us is, I'll zoom out for a second. This is a transverse mounted, meaning it's mounted sideways, Ford Duratech 2.5 liter naturally aspirated, meaning it doesn't use a turbocharger, Ford Duratech engine. It's really underwhelming, but adequate, and will last forever if you take care of it. So directly in front of us here, use my wrench to point these out. These are called coils, and if you're kind of a novice to engines, these are what deliver the electric spark from the vehicle's electrical system to the spark plug, and then that spark plug makes a spark inside of the cylinders, mixes with the gas, that explodes, or burns is more appropriate, and that pushes the piston down, and that's what helps make power to make the vehicle go. So over time, the spark plugs wear down and they need to be replaced, and that's why we're here today. This is a 93,000 mile engine, so it's about time to go ahead and replace the plugs. So this is the procedure to do so. One thing I forgot to mention, we didn't talk about what kind of spark plugs to use. So Ford asked the manufacturer NGK to make the plugs for this engine originally. So when you pull the Motorcraft plugs out, I can go ahead and show you that. These are the original plugs. I kept the original packaging. The factory will put some kind of a protection around the electrode in the arm so that the gap does not get damaged by shipment, basically, getting dropped, kicked around, whatever. Kept all the plastic. I'm going to make a video later, hopefully, talking about the color that you see here and what that means on how the engine's running. But more importantly, bring this in, get the focus on. Oh, upside down. All right, so Fumoco, I mean that's the original Motorcraft part. You'll notice it says Japan right there. And you have, okay, very hard to see, much better. There is an actual part number here. This is an NGK part number. NGK is the original manufacturer. So when I went to my local auto parts store, I just went ahead, cut out the middleman, didn't buy the Motorcraft. I bought NGK. So this particular NGK, there we go, is in iridium 9. So the stock number is 4344. The NGK part number is LTR5IX-11. And these are 100% compatible with the Duratech 2.5. They work great. They're not the cheapest plugs around because they're iridiums, which mean they're long life, but you put these in, you're not going to have to worry about your plugs for at least another 100,000 miles. I will note that this is my second attempt doing this. I lost the footage on my first try, so when I pull the plug out, you're going to see that it looks brand new, because it is. I'm going to do one coil and plug, because if you do one, it's the same for the remaining 3. Same operation, just rinse and repeat. So the first thing you're going to need to do, so you see there is an electrical connector here. See if I get an angle on it. There's a push tab in the center of the connector. push that tab down and pull, it'll come right off. That's the first thing that needs to happen. Second thing is if you look behind, right here, again, I'll point out with my ratchet, there is a keeper bolt to help hold the coil in position. That is an 8mm. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to reposition the camera, and I'll bring you guys back once I do that. We'll go ahead and work on getting this out of the way. Okay guys, we're back. We'll go ahead and get started on that keeper bolt. Like I said, 8mm, and in this case I am using a 1/4 drive deep well 8mm here. Nothing fancy. For those though who might be new to mechanicking, with a ratchet you normally have some form of a selector switch. One will be to tighten something, which will turn it clockwise, and one will be to loosen something, which will be to turn it counterclockwise or anti-clockwise for my friends across the pond. Easy way to check which way you're going is to actuate it, see which way it's going to spin. So this one's spinning to the left, that means loosen. And if you're not sure which direction is what when you get on a bolt, always remember righty tighty, lefty loosey. So got this one loose, just spin it up with my fingers. Try to let you guys see. All right, got that out of the way. Now to loosen the coil, just need a wiggle, come right out. Now this came out super easy also because I've already pulled this, like I said, a few days ago. When you pull the coil, get the zoom here, make sure you look down where that metal collar is at the bottom of the coil. If that collar is rusted out, if it's broken, if it's cracked, this is what's actually connecting to the spark plug. If you don't have a good connection here, you're not going to get good spark to the plug, and you're going to have problems with this particular cylinder. If this looks all fouled up, I'd suggest that you go buy a new coil. But this one looks fine, so we're going to set it aside. Now, you're going to need something called a spark plug socket. Looks like this. It'll have a neck that's designed to take a wrench if needed. That's why it is faceted. But the big deal is, as you can see, might be a little hard. In my case, there's a rubber seal at the bottom of this socket, and that's to help catch and hold the spark plug so that when you go to pull it out, the spark plug will come out with it. Some of these have a magnet in the very bottom, does the same thing. Now, there are a couple of different sizes of spark plug socket, and for this job, you're going to need the 5/8. That is what this particular vehicle uses. If you're doing this for another vehicle, maybe a different size, you're going to need to do your homework and check on that before you get started on the vehicle. Now, I'm trying to get a custom height here. That's why I have this converter bit in there. It's not because I like 1/4 drives more. I'm trying to get just the right height so that I'll have a little bit more swing room when I go to pop this out. I was having all sorts of problems with that when I first recorded this. That little extra height is perfect. So you're going to loosen this. If this is the first time you've changed the plug since you bought the vehicle, if you live up north, if you live where salt gets used in the winter, makes everything super rusty and crusty, then you may have a fight on your hands, and you may need to use some sort of a penetrating lubricant, loosen things up. And if you have a plug that's super stuck, you probably want to back off and let a professional mechanic go after it, because spark plugs will snap. And then you got a world of hurt trying to get that out. But in this case, Like I said, these plugs are brand new. I successfully got the old ones out. So, not much for me to worry about. So, like I said, this plug is practically brand new. That's why it does look practically brand new. And you see that little bell-shaped thing there at the tip, that is called the electrode. And that gap between the electrode and the arm that's sitting above it, that's what makes the spark. Now that gap is really important. If it is too big, bad camera. If it is too big or if it is too small, it's going to cause problems. Your engine will not run as efficiently as it should, and in rare cases it's going to cause a misfire, which is very bad. Now, like I said, these are brand new. And the camera is not behaving. There we go. Oh, nope. Alright, I apologize. I'm still learning how to do this. Camera keeps losing focus. There we go. Okay, so here we go. We got a great look at the electrode and the arm. Now, like I said, the gap is very important. Each manufacturer should tell you what these plugs should be gapped at. In this case, the gap is supposed to be 0.052 inches. Now, I already checked the gap on these, and it is correct. So I'm not going to gap these, and I'm not going to show you how to adjust gap. I'll make that a separate video that I can use old plugs with in case something goes wrong. Because with this particular brand of spark plug, I'll show you that in a second, there is plating, special plating on the underside of this arm. You can't see it. And if you scratch that off, you're going to severely shorten the service life of this plug. So, all that being said, that's how you pull the old plug out. And to put it back in is the reverse of removal. Now, before we go to put this back in, you may have heard people say, hey, you need to put anti-seize on these threads. And anti-seize is a compound, a paste normally, that, as the name implies, keeps things from getting stuck. I don't use it, but the reason why I don't is I know that my vehicle is not going to get super rusty and this plug's not going to get gummed up. The original plugs from Ford that had 93,000 miles on them, I got them out without too much of a fight. If you live somewhere that's significantly rustier and crustier, I would suggest you put some anti-seize on these so that they do not lock up on you. But that's my 2 cents on that. I can make a whole nother video on anti-seize down the road if folks would like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back in. And important thing here, when you go to put it in your spark plug socket. As you can see, we got a deep well. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. Once you take the spark plug out, you need to be extremely careful around where the coil and the plug go, because now you have an open hole directly into the combustion chamber, directly where the piston is. And you do not, I repeat, do not want to have dirt or any other debris fall in there. If it does, it could scratch up the inside walls of the cylinder. It can damage the rings, the sealing rings that go around the piston. It can cause all sorts of problems that you really don't want. So, be careful. If you've got a lot of dirt and dust around where your spark plugs are, you may want to consider cleaning that out first before you try pulling anything. In my case, I kind of eyeballed it. Looks okay. So, not super worried. To thread this back in, again, turn to the right. These are not counter threaded. When you go to screw these in, do it by hand. Do not use any kind of air tool or electric tool, because most modern engine blocks are made of aluminum. Aluminum is soft. If you accidentally cross thread and you damage the threads on your block, you're going to be in for a heck of a time trying to fix that without getting into a really expensive situation where the engine's got to come out. So you do not want that. So thread it in by hand as far as you can. If you feel it getting really, really tight early for some reason, back off, check your threads. You may need to put some lubricant on them. So I've gotten it in a decent amount. I'm going to get my tool back on here. Notice I have set it to tighten from loosen. Go ahead and tighten this back up. Now we've hit a hard stop. This is where the plug's supposed to sit. In my case, I'm going to give it just a bit of a tug past that. Not much, because again, you do not want this to snap. You do not want it to break. Bad stuff happens. So we give it a good snug. And again, someone may say, well, you should have looked up the torque spec. Fair enough. Smaller things like spark plugs, I'll use a small ratchet where you cannot apply as much force. I'll use my weaker arm, give it a little elbow torque. That way I do not over torque it, which is that's when you get into the situation of possibly making things weak because you have stretched whatever you're torquing because you've made it too tight, or potentially snapping it, which is also very bad. So as you can see, pushing the coil back down, lining it up with its keeper bolt. Screw this keeper bolt back in. And for those playing along at home, it's an 8mm that we need for this keeper bolt. So I'm going to take this off, put my 8mm back on. We're already set to tighten. And then tighten that up. Again, I just kind of elbow torque this till it's snug. You don't need to kill it. It's okay if there's a tiny bit of wiggle there in the coil. And then we're going to take our electrical. It's keyed, meaning it can only go on one way. For example, you can't put it on like this. That won't work. The shape is wrong. Also note there's a blob of green paint right there. It matches up with a blob of green paint right there where my fingernail is. It's kind of hard to see, but it's there. So slide them up. Push till you click. Give it a couple of pulls to make sure the locking mechanism has engaged and you're good to go. All right, welcome back everyone. I have finished up. As you can see, I retorqued all the little holder bolts for the coils. I have reconnected all the electrical. Make sure that you always do a post inspection when you finish doing work. It's an easy way to catch stuff you miss, or maybe catch things that need to be worked on later. In this case, everything is back in as it should be, and the engine bay looks good. I've got my tools out of the way of anything that could rotate or spin. So that way when I go to test fire the engine, we're not going to have an issue. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so ignitions are on the right side, which means I got to move all this over. That's what happens when you're a lefty. Alright, so let's see what we get. Key the ignition and okay, fires right up. Engine idle sounds good. Not seeing any misfire lights, which what that would be is you would see your check engine light and it would be flashing quickly. If you get that, turn it off immediately. It means you're getting misfires, which means you did something wrong when you put the spark plugs back in. I'm not seeing that though. Looks pretty good. The engine idle's dropped below 1000, so it's at standard idle. Let's go take a look at the engine to see if we have any excessive vibration or anything. So for this one, you see it is shaking a little bit, but that is normal for this engine. Has 93,000 miles on it, and it's always exhibited this behavior. So I am going to call this a successful repair. All right guys, that is going to wrap it up for this video. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I will have some more content up soon. Bye-bye for now.